In Yasmin's Bay Ridge house is a tiny room with a computer and a fax machine used by her father for his business. This became her war room. She just couldn't accept that in the United States a Muslim girl would have to choose between her religion and her elected responsibilities. Over the next few months, she would go online and read all she could about the law. She began printing everything out, organizing a file in a folder decorated with multicolored smiley faces, as well as studying in the front matter of a planner given to her by her high school, especially the Bill of Student Rights and Responsibilities, where she highlighted everything relevant to her situation, even correcting its grammar. She put yellow marker to the sentence, "Students have a right to be in a safe and supportive learning environment, free from discrimination, harassment, and bigotry." And she underlined discrimination. A fire had been lit under her, and researching the law became first a task, then a hobby, then finally an obsession. The planner was essential for Yasmin. It was where, she told me, she first grasped the concept of rights. And she would use the idea of students' rights in every conversation she could. She began sounding like Black's Law Dictionary, arguing with her friends in high school legalese about her situation. She would rustle printed out pages of legal websites under the Kosa's nose. He would hear her out and then tell her that it wasn't going to work, that the decision had been made. She posted her story anonymously to a student leadership website to gauge the reaction from strangers across the country. If your religion prohibits you from doing something, and if your opponent can participate, then logically your opponent will be selected over you, was a typical response. Her parents suggested she forget the past and concentrate instead on her schoolwork. Rather than compelling her to study, the admonition caused her to hide most of her research. And at night she continued to cry over her resignation, unable to let it go. "I must have been an annoying person," she says now. But no one, not her friends, her parents, the students in leadership, was listening to her, so she changed course in early 2001. She looked up the New York City Board of Education online and emailed a trustee her story, signed with only her first name and the first initial of her last name. A few days later, she received an email response. "Your letter has been forwarded to the board's legal office for investigation," it read. "We need some additional information in order to respond. Please identify what school and district you attend. Also, what events were you able to attend and when were they held? Who instructed you to resign from your position? What position did you hold, and for what period? To whom did you explain that your religion prevented you from attending events? We share your concern that religious beliefs be respected. With the additional information I have requested, we should be able to investigate your complaint." Yasmin wrote back immediately, "I have great concern for what happened to me. However, I do not wish to identify the school. If extremely necessary, maybe I'll give it to you. However, I do not wish to tar my school's good reputation. I love my school to death, but if really necessary, I will reveal it. I attend a high school in Brooklyn, New York. I don't know the district. I most certainly could not attend dances or rock shows. We have many dances on Fridays, which is, by the way, a holy day for me, almost like the Sabbath or church Sunday. I just can't be there. For example, it's like the people are selling drugs, and I'm just an innocent bystander. I would get arrested even if I had nothing to do with it. This is just an example. No offense meant. That's what it's like. I can't go against my religion. Even if you find out my school, please keep it confidential until I am notified. I take that much pride in my school. Emails traveled back and forth for a while, but ultimately Yasmin wasn't prepared to reveal her school, and so the communications trickled off and then stopped. Meanwhile, she kept confronting the Kosa with her pseudo-legal arguments, until one day he gave her the telephone number of Dr. Irizarry, the school superintendent and the author of the Students' Bill of Rights. She called him full of hope, but again she reached a dead end. Dr. Irizarry asked her if people thought it was fair for her to be able... Dr. Irizarry asked her if people thought it was unfair for her to be an exception. Yes, she said, a few. Well, that's not a good atmosphere, he said, and she hung up the phone after 10 minutes, having achieved nothing. She was losing her fight, and she felt abandoned and alone. She began looking up inspirational sayings on the internet for support. She wrote in her notebook, "Those who stand for nothing fall for everything." If no one would help her, she reasoned, she would have to do it by herself. For months she spent hours after school in the Brooklyn Public Library on 73rd Street, checking out law books and guides, and Justice for All, the legal rights of young people, the rights of students, the ACLU Handbook for Young Americans, Teens on Trial, young people who challenged the law and changed your life, Sue the Bastards, everything you need to go to or stay out of court, Law for Dummies, and others. She would bring them home and type up relevant portions, which is how she learned the basics of contracts and lawsuits and various legal concepts on religious accommodation and anti-discrimination. Whenever she felt she had a new argument, she would go talk again to the Kosa after leadership. As always, he listened to her carefully, never shutting her up or getting impatient with her, but he would always shoot her down, telling her that the point she had discovered didn't apply to her situation, or that she was falsely extrapolating from the law. Then he would send her packing. Meanwhile, the leadership class was planning further school events for the year, which entailed rearranging the dance schedule twice. Once when the dance landed on the night of a Jewish holiday, which would have prevented the religious Jewish students from attending, and again when the event fell on the same night as the Sweet 16 party of one of the girls in leadership. Steam poured out of Yasmin's ears at the double standard. But what bothered her most was something she encountered in her own amateur legal education. It was called the statute of limitations, which stipulated that in many cases you had only 1 year from an incident to file a lawsuit. So when the election cycle came around again in April, Yasmin had an idea. She would push back. If her case threatened to become moot after a year, then she would have to find a way to keep it alive. She would run again, this time for vice president. And then, when the same issue arose, she would have another full year to make a case, now with much more legal experience under her belt to fight for her rights. Actually, winning the election was a minor bump in her plan. The main thing was to keep the issue burning.